I did a DNA test for fun. My results said I died in 1987. The email notification pinged on my phone at 2:47 a.m., and the subject line made my blood run cold. Your Ancestry DNA results are ready. I had taken the test as a joke 3 months ago, a silly impulse buy during a wine-fueled girls' night. But the results waiting for me on that screen would shatter everything I thought I knew about my life. Because according to the database, the DNA sample I had submitted belonged to someone who had been dead for 36 years. My name is Sarah Mitchell. At least that's what I've been called for all 38 years of my existence. I'm a high school chemistry teacher in Portland, Oregon. I live alone in a modest apartment with my cat, Mr. Whiskers, and I have what most people would call an unremarkably normal life. I grade papers, I attend faculty meetings, I visit my parents every other Sunday for dinner in their quiet suburban home. I'm the kind of person who follows recipes exactly, who always uses her turn signal, who has never gotten so much as a speeding ticket. My life is predictable, safe, boring even. And until that night, that's exactly how I liked it. The DNA test had been Emma's idea. Emma Chen, my best friend since college, the wild, spontaneous yin to my cautious, methodical yang. We were sitting in my living room 3 months earlier on our monthly wine and terrible reality TV night when she pulled out the kit. "Come on, Sarah," she had said, waving the little plastic tube at me. "Don't you want to know if you're secretly descended from royalty? Or if you have some exotic ancestry? Your parents are so boring and white-bread American. There's got to be something interesting hiding in your genes." I had laughed, the wine making me more adventurous than usual. "My parents have traced our family tree back to the Mayflower, Emma. I'm about as exotic as plain oatmeal." "Exactly," she had exclaimed. "That's what they say. But what if there's a secret, a scandal, a forbidden romance with a mysterious stranger?" And so, giggling like teenagers, I had spit into the tube, sealed it, and mailed it off, promptly forgetting about it entirely. Life went on. I taught my students about chemical bonds and periodic tables. I graded essays. I lived my quiet, unremarkable life. Until that email arrived in the dead of night. I had been having trouble sleeping lately. Nothing serious, just the usual low-grade anxiety that comes with being a single woman approaching 40. The biological clock, tick-tock. The "when are you going to settle down" questions from my mother. The creeping awareness that my life, while comfortable, was perhaps a little too safe, a little too small. I had gotten up to get a glass of water, my phone in hand, out of habit, when I saw the notification. My first reaction was mild curiosity. My second, as I opened the email and began to read, was a slow, creeping sense that something was very, very wrong. The results page loaded with its cheerful, colorful graphics. Ethnicity breakdown: 47% British, 31% Scandinavian, 18% Eastern European, 4% broadly Northwestern European. Nothing shocking there, but then I scrolled down to the section labeled DNA matches close family, and that's when my world tilted on its axis. The first match listed was labeled parent-child relationship, 50% DNA shared. But the name next to it wasn't my mother, Patricia Mitchell, or my father, Robert Mitchell. The name was Jennifer Hartley, and next to her profile picture, a smiling woman with auburn hair and green eyes that looked hauntingly, impossibly familiar, was a small notation in gray text that made my hands start to shake. Deceased, 1987. I clicked on her profile with trembling fingers. The page that loaded was sparse, clearly created by someone else as a memorial. Jennifer Marie Hartley, born March 15, 1960, died August 3, 1987. Beloved daughter, sister, and mother. The photo showed a young woman, maybe 27 years old, holding a baby. A baby with a shock of dark hair and wide, curious eyes. A baby that looked exactly like me in my own baby photos. Hello. Before we continue with this incredible story, I have an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube removed their subscriptions without prior notice. Take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content that's coming. And since you're here, give me that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, from which city are you watching the video? I love getting to know each of the amazing people who are part of this community. Your participation makes a difference. Let's interact. Now, where was I? Ah, yes. I was staring at a photo of a dead woman who, according to a DNA database, was my biological mother. A woman I had never seen before in my life. I sat there in my dark kitchen, the only light coming from my phone screen, and I felt the first cold finger of real fear trace down my spine. Because if this woman was my mother, and she died in 1987, then who were the people I had been calling mom and dad for 38 years? I looked at the baby in the photo again. The timestamp on the image said it was taken in June 1987, 2 months before Jennifer Hartley died, 2 months before I would have been. I did the math quickly in my head. If I was born in 1987 and this woman died in August of that year, my official birthday, according to my birth certificate, was October 12, 1987. But what if that was a lie? What if I was that baby in the photo? What if I was born months earlier? I clicked back to the DNA matches page, my heart now hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. There were other matches. A close family sibling match. The name was Michael Hartley. His profile was active, updated recently. His photo showed a man in his early 40s with the same auburn hair, the same green eyes. The same eyes I saw every morning in my own mirror. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night. I sat at my kitchen table, my laptop open, diving down a rabbit hole that grew darker and more terrifying with every click. I searched for Jennifer Hartley. I found her obituary in the archives of a small newspaper from Spokane, Washington. Jennifer Marie Hartley, 27, died tragically on August 3, 1987, in a car accident on Highway 2. She is survived by her parents, Robert and Susan Hartley of Spokane, her brother Michael, and her infant daughter, Emma Rose Hartley, age 4 months. Services will be held. ... Emma Rose Hartley. I read the name 3 times, my vision blurring. Emma Rose, not Sarah. Emma. I pulled up my birth certificate from the file cabinet in my bedroom, a document I had needed only a handful of times in my life. For my driver's license, for my passport, for my teaching credential. I looked at it now with new, suspicious eyes. Name, Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell. Date of birth, October 12, 1987. Place of birth, Portland, Oregon. Mother, Patricia Ann Mitchell. Father, Robert James Mitchell. It looked official. It had the state seal, the registrar's signature. But now, holding it under the harsh light of my desk lamp, I noticed something I had never seen before. The paper was slightly different in texture in one small corner, and the ink of my birth date looked just a shade darker than the rest of the document, as if it had been added later, as if it had been forged. I called in sick to work that morning. I never call in sick. In 12 years of teaching, I had perfect attendance. But I couldn't face a classroom full of teenagers, couldn't pretend to care about balancing chemical equations when my entire existence was unbalanced. I needed answers. And there was only one place to start. I drove to my parents' house in the suburbs, arriving just after 9 a.m. My mother answered the door in her bathrobe, surprise and concern on her face. "Sarah? Honey, what's wrong? You look terrible. Are you sick?" I pushed past her into the familiar living room, the room where I had grown up, where I had opened Christmas presents and done homework and watched TV. It looked the same as always. Beige carpet, floral sofa, family photos on the mantel. Family photos. I walked over to the mantel and picked up the oldest one. It showed my parents, looking impossibly young, holding a baby. Me, supposedly. The photo was labeled in my mother's neat handwriting, Sarah, 6 months old, April 1988. But if I had been born in October 1987, I would have been 6 months old in April 1988. The math worked. Except I looked closer at the photo. The baby was wearing a pink onesie with a small embroidered flower on the collar. I had seen that onesie before, not in my own baby album, but in the photo of Jennifer Hartley holding her daughter. The same onesie. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." My mother, Patricia Mitchell, the woman who had raised me, who had braided my hair and packed my lunches and taught me to ride a bike, looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it fear? Guilt? "Of course, honey. What is it?" I turned to face her, the photo still in my hand. "Am I adopted?" The color drained from her face. It was such a sudden, complete transformation that it was almost comical. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "What? Sarah, why would you? Where is this coming from?" "Just answer the question, am I adopted?" "No," she said, but her voice was too high, too quick. "No, of course not. You're our daughter, our biological daughter. Why are you asking this?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the DNA results, the match with Jennifer Hartley, the obituary. I watched her face as she read, watched the careful mask of confusion slip, just for a moment, revealing something underneath, something that looked like panic. This must be a mistake," she stammered. "These DNA tests, they're not always accurate. There are false positives, mix-ups at the lab." "Mom," I said, my voice now cold and hard. "Who is Jennifer Hartley?" "I don't know," she whispered. But she was lying. I could see it in her eyes, in the way her hands trembled as she handed my phone back to me. "Where's Dad?" He's at the hardware store. He'll be back soon." "Good," I said, "because we're going to sit down, the three of us, and you're going to tell me the truth, all of it." I sat on that floral sofa, in that familiar living room, and waited for my father to come home. My mother disappeared into the kitchen, and I could hear her on the phone, her voice a low, urgent whisper. She was calling him, warning him. And as I sat there, surrounded by the artifacts of a childhood that now felt like a carefully constructed lie, I noticed something else, something I had seen 1,000 times but never really looked at. On the bookshelf, partially hidden behind a framed photo, was a small wooden jewelry box. I had seen my mother take it out occasionally, usually when she thought she was alone, holding it with a strange, sad reverence before putting it away again. I had always assumed it held some sentimental trinket, maybe a gift from my father. But now, driven by a suspicion I couldn't name, I walked over and picked it up. It was locked, but the key, I remembered, was kept in the kitchen drawer, the junk drawer where we kept batteries and rubber bands and spare keys. I found it easily, my hands shaking as I fitted it into the small brass lock. The box opened with a soft click. Inside was a birth certificate, but not mine. This one was for Emma Rose Hartley, born June 15, 1987, in Spokane, Washington. Mother, Jennifer Marie Hartley. Father, unknown. And underneath it, folded carefully, was a small pink onesie with an embroidered flower on the collar. The sound of the front door opening made me jump. I quickly closed the jewelry box, but I kept the birth certificate clutched in my hand, the evidence of a crime I was only beginning to understand. My father, Robert Mitchell, walked into the living room. He was a tall man, still handsome at 65, with silver hair and the kind of steady, calm demeanor that had always made me feel safe. But now, looking at him, I felt only a cold, creeping dread. He saw the paper in my hand. He saw my face, and his own face, that familiar, beloved face, crumpled. "Sarah," he said softly, "please, let me explain." "Explain?" I said, my voice rising to a near shout. Explain what exactly? That you kidnapped me? That you stole me from my real mother? That my entire life is a lie? It wasn't like that, my mother said, emerging from the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. Please, Sarah, you have to understand. We didn't steal you. We saved you. Save me? I was shaking now, my entire body vibrating with rage and fear and a grief so profound I couldn't even name it. From what? My father sat down heavily on the sofa, his head in his hands. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were red. From the system, he said quietly. From a life in foster care, from being lost and forgotten. And then slowly, haltingly, they told me the story. The real story. They had been trying to have a child for years, my mother explained. Years of fertility treatments, of miscarriages, of hope and heartbreak. By 1987, they had given up. They had started the adoption process, but the waiting lists were long, the requirements stringent. My father was a social worker at the time, working for the state of Washington. In August of 1987, he was called to the scene of a car accident on Highway 2, a single-car crash. The driver, a young woman named Jennifer Hartley, had died on impact. In the back seat, miraculously unharmed, was a 4-month-old baby girl. There was no father listed on the birth certificate, my father said, his voice hollow. Jennifer's parents were elderly, in poor health. Her brother, Michael, was only 19, barely able to take care of himself. The baby was going to go into the foster system. So you just took her? I said, my voice incredulous. You just decided to steal a child? It wasn't like that, my mother said desperately. We didn't plan it. It just happened. But as they continued talking, the truth became clear. It wasn't a moment of impulse. It was a calculated, methodical crime. My father had access to the records. He knew the system was overwhelmed, understaffed. He knew that a baby placed in emergency foster care in Spokane could easily be lost in the paperwork, especially if someone with access to the system wanted them to be. He had falsified documents. He had created a new birth certificate, listing himself and my mother as my biological parents, backdating my birth to October to make the timeline work. He had moved us from Washington to Oregon, to a new city where no one knew us, where no one would ask questions about the sudden appearance of a baby. They had stolen me. And then they had spent 38 years living with that secret, raising me as their own, loving me. I didn't doubt they loved me, but building that love on a foundation of lies and theft. What about my real family? I asked, my voice breaking. What about Jennifer's parents? Her brother? Did they ever look for me? My father's face was a mask of guilt. They tried, he admitted, for a while. But the official story was that you had been placed with a family in eastern Washington, and the records were sealed for your protection. Eventually, they stopped looking. They believed you were safe, being cared for. They didn't know you had kidnapped me and were raising me under a false identity, I finished, my voice cold. I looked at these two people, these strangers who had been my parents for my entire life. I tried to find the anger, the righteous fury I should feel, but underneath it all was a more complicated, more painful emotion. They had saved me from the foster system. That was true. They had given me a good life, a stable home, an education. They had loved me. But they had also robbed me of my identity, of my history, of my real family. They had let my biological grandmother and grandfather die without ever knowing what happened to their granddaughter. They had let my uncle Michael spend his entire adult life wondering what became of his baby sister's child. I need to know everything, I said, my voice steady now, cold. I need to know exactly what you did, how you did it, and why you thought you had the right to make this choice. And so they told me. Every detail. The falsified paperwork, The fake medical record showing my mother had given birth in a Portland hospital. The careful construction of a paper trail that would withstand casual scrutiny. We told ourselves we were doing it for you, my mother said, her voice choked with tears. We told ourselves that you would have a better life with us than in the system. And you did, didn't you? We gave you everything. We loved you. You loved a lie, I said. You loved the idea of a daughter. But you never gave me the chance to know who I really was. We were going to tell you, my father said weakly, when you were older, when you could understand. I'm 38 years old, I said. How much older did I need to be? The truth was, they were never going to tell me. They had convinced themselves that the lie was a kindness, that ignorance was protection. They had built a life on that lie, and they would have taken it to their graves if I hadn't stumbled onto the truth by accident. I left their house that afternoon with the birth certificate, my real birth certificate, and a head full of information I didn't know how to process. I drove home in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles were white. I wasn't Sarah Mitchell. I was Emma Rose Hartley. I was the daughter of a woman who died when I was 4 months old, a woman I would never know. I had a family I had never met, a history I had been robbed of, and I had a choice to make. I could go to the police. What my parents had done was a crime. Kidnapping, falsifying documents, identity fraud. They could go to prison. My entire life would become a media spectacle. Teacher discovers she was kidnapped as a baby. I could already see the headlines. Or I could do nothing. I could keep the secret, protect the people who had raised me, live with the knowledge, but not act on it. But there was a third option, one that terrified me and compelled me in equal measure. I could find my real family. I could reach out to Michael Hartley, the uncle I had never known. I could reclaim the identity that had been stolen from me. I pulled up his profile on the DNA website again. There was a message button. My finger hovered over it, and then, before I could talk myself out of it, I clicked it and began to type. Dear Michael, my name is Sarah Mitchell, but I think I might actually be your niece, Emma Rose Hartley. I think we need to talk. Michael Hartley responded to my message within an hour. His reply was short, shaken, disbelieving. Is this some kind of sick joke? Emma died with my sister in the accident. The state told us she didn't survive. If this is real, if you're really... Please call me. Here's my number. I called him, and for the next 2 hours, sitting in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store because I couldn't bear to go home, I listened to him tell me about my real mother. Jennifer Hartley had been a free spirit, he said, an artist, a dreamer. She had gotten pregnant at 26, and she never told anyone who the father was. She said it didn't matter, Michael told me, his voice thick with emotion. She said the baby was hers, and that was all that mattered. She had been driving to Seattle that day in August, he said. She was going to meet with a gallery owner who was interested in her paintings. She had left me with a neighbor for the day, but at the last minute, she decided to bring me along. If she hadn't, Michael said, his voice breaking, if she had just left you with Mrs. Patterson like she planned, you would have been safe. She would have died, but you would have been with us. We would have raised you. You would have known your family. But she had brought me. And when the accident happened, when the state social worker arrived at the scene, my father had seen an opportunity. A baby with no father, a mother who was dead, elderly grandparents, a teenage brother, a baby who could disappear into the system or disappear into his arms. They told us you were placed with a family in Spokane, Michael said. They said the adoption was closed, that we couldn't have any contact. My parents, they were devastated. They tried to fight it, but they were old. They were grieving. The state said it was for your protection, that you needed stability. They died not knowing, I said, the words like ashes in my mouth. Your parents, my grandparents, they died thinking I was out there somewhere, safe, but lost to them. Yes, Michael whispered. My father died in 1995. My mother in 2003. They never stopped wondering about you. Never stopped hoping that someday, somehow, they'd get to see you again. We agreed to meet in person. Michael lived in Seattle, just a 3-hour drive from Portland. We met at a coffee shop, neutral territory, both of us terrified and desperate in equal measure. I saw him through the window before I went in. He was sitting at a corner table, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup, his eyes scanning the door. And when I walked in, when our eyes met, I watched his face transform. He stood up slowly, like a man in a dream. And then he started to cry. You look just like her, he said, his voice choked. You have her eyes, her smile. Oh my God, Emma, you're really here. He pulled out his phone and showed me photos. Photos of Jennifer as a child, as a teenager, as a young woman. Photos of her holding me as a newborn, her face radiant with love and joy. Photos of a life I should have had, a family I should have known. She would have been so proud of you, he said. A teacher. She always said education was the key to everything. She would have loved that. We talked for hours. He told me about my grandparents, about family traditions, about the small house in Spokane where I would have grown up. He told me about Jennifer's art, her dreams, her plans for our future together. And then he asked the question I had been dreading. What are you going to do about the people who took you? I thought about my parents, the Mitchells. I thought about my childhood, the birthday parties, and the bedtime stories, and the careful, loving attention they had given me. I thought about the crime they had committed, the lives they had destroyed with their selfishness, and I thought about the choice I had to make. I don't know, I admitted. They're criminals. They kidnapped me. They robbed me of my family, my identity. They should go to prison. But, Michael said gently, but they're also the only parents I've ever known. They raised me. They loved me. And God help me, I love them too. Michael reached across the table and took my hand. Emma, he said, using my real name for the first time, I can't tell you what to do. I can't tell you how to feel. If you want to go to the police, I'll support you. If you want justice, you deserve it. But, he smiled sadly, but Jennifer always said that love was more complicated than right and wrong. She said that sometimes the most important thing wasn't justice, it was healing. I drove back to Portland that night with a car full of photos, documents, and memories of a life I never lived. Michael had given me everything he had. Jennifer's art, her journals, her letters. He had given me my history, and he had given me a choice. I could destroy the Mitchells. I could expose their crime, reclaim my legal identity, make them pay for what they had done, or I could choose a different path. I went to their house the next morning. They were waiting for me, their faces drawn and terrified. They knew what I could do to them. They knew their entire lives were in my hands. I met my uncle yesterday, I said without preamble. Michael Hartley. He told me about my mother, about my grandparents, about the life I should have had. My mother, Patricia, let out a small, broken sob. I should turn you in, I continued, my voice hard. I should make you pay for what you did, for the people you hurt, for the life you stole from me. We know, my father said quietly. We know, and we're sorry. We're so sorry. But I'm not going to, I said. They both looked up at me, shock and hope and confusion on their faces. I'm not going to turn you in, I repeated. But not because I forgive you. I don't know if I ever will. I'm doing it because I'm choosing healing over revenge. I'm choosing to move forward instead of destroying everything. I pulled out a piece of paper, a document I had drafted with the help of a lawyer I had consulted. This is a legal agreement, I said. You're going to sign it. It says that you acknowledge what you did. It says that you agree to help me legally reclaim my identity as Emma Rose Hartley. It says that you'll pay for the therapy I'm going to need to process this. and it says that you'll help me build a relationship with my real family. We'll sign anything, my mother said immediately. Anything you want. There's one more thing, I said. You're going to write a letter, a full confession, everything you did, how you did it, why you did it. You're going to seal it and give it to my lawyer. If anything happens to me, if you ever try to stop me from living my life as Emma Hartley, that letter goes to the police. Do you understand? They understood. The process of reclaiming my identity took months. Legal name change, corrected birth certificate, updated documents. I became, legally and officially, Emma Rose Hartley. But I kept Mitchell as a middle name, a reminder of the complicated, painful truth that I was both people. The girl who was stolen and the woman who was raised. I built a relationship with Michael. Slowly, carefully, like two people learning a new language. He introduced me to cousins I never knew I had, to family friends who remembered my mother. He took me to her grave, and I stood there for the first time, looking at the headstone that read, Jennifer Marie Hartley, beloved daughter, sister, and mother. I brought flowers. I told her I was sorry I never knew her. I told her I wished things had been different. But I also told her that I was okay. That despite everything, I had turned out okay. The Mitchells and I have a relationship now, but it's different. Strained. Complicated. They're not my parents anymore. Not really. They're the people who raised me, who loved me, who also hurt me in ways I'm still learning to understand. We have dinner once a month. We talk. We're trying, but I also have Michael. I have my real family. I have my mother's paintings on my walls and her journals on my shelf. I have my history, my identity, my truth. I teach my students about chemistry, about how elements combine and transform, how nothing is ever truly created or destroyed, only changed. And I think about my own life, about how I was Emma, then Sarah, and now Emma again. I think about identity, about the stories we tell ourselves, about the complicated truth that we are shaped by both our biology and our experiences. And I think about the DNA test that changed everything, the simple curiosity that unraveled a 38-year-old lie. Sometimes my students ask me why I'm so passionate about the truth, about accuracy, about getting the facts exactly right. They don't understand why I'm so strict about proper citations, about showing your work, about never, ever falsifying data. I never tell them the real reason. But I know, because I know what happens when people decide that their version of the truth is more important than the actual truth. I know what happens when people convince themselves that a lie, if it's told with love, is somehow acceptable. I know because I lived that lie for 38 years. And I know that the truth, no matter how painful, is always better than the most beautiful lie. My name is Emma Rose Hartley, and that's the truth.